There are times as a mixer that you really don't know what kind of tracks you're going to be given. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to organize your tracks for volume, for track order, and also naming your tracks. And this way we can be better prepared to actually start mixing so we can sound better and mix faster with Harrison Mixbus32c. All right, so the first thing I see here is we had about 65 tracks that were imported during the track import process. And I can already tell there's a lot of versions of different tracks, like there's multiple snares, multiple kicks, multiple vocals, and so forth. So here's the original volume of all the tracks as they were imported in. All right, so I want you to notice right away that, one, I do have my monitor down, so I'm not hitting the recording software as hot. But you can already see that the needle is getting into the red just with all the tracks where they are right now. So I could easily go in and use the trim knob and move the trim up and down for each individual track. But the easiest way to do this right now is to select the first region and do Command A on a Mac, and now it's going to highlight all the tracks. And what we're going to use now is Ctrl+7 to bring down our gain. And let's bring it down by like 10 dB. And let's just see what that sounds like now. So we're going to press Enter to go back to start, and here we go. Also notice that the limiter is also being activated because our peaks are going close to the 0 dBFS area, and the limiter is helping to knock those down. But what we can do at this point is use our trim to bring that down even more. So let's bring the trim down by 6 dB or so, somewhere in that ballpark. And let's listen one more time, and let's see where our needle on the K14 meter is hitting. Okay, so none of the tracks are going to any buses right now except for the master bus. Let's pull up our Meterbridge by hitting Ctrl+B. And I'm actually going to double click on the green so it gets nice and big. And we can see that it did hit all the way up. Click that to reset the peaks. And let's listen once again. And let's see what this looks like on the Meterbridge. Okay, notice that the red line is hitting around +10. And I can also right click on this. And I'm going to choose K20. So now you can see that the 0 mark right here moves a little bit versus where it was on the K14. See, it actually moves a little bit higher. So we're going to bring everything down to K20 now. This is going to give us plenty of headroom on our master bus for when we start organizing and mixing all our tracks. Okay, great. So that was actually a really good move by turning down the trim knob by 6 dB, because what that allowed us to do is our green going into the yellow LEDs are hitting right at that K20 point. And that's pretty much where you want to be when you're mixing your song. Now, you don't start getting to the hotter levels of K14, K12 until you start your mastering stage. So for now, this gives us plenty of headroom, and we can move on to actually organizing our tracks and not blowing out our ears with just pumping too much level into the master bus. So there's two ways to close out the meter bridge. We can hit the X, or we can just hit Ctrl+B again, and it'll exit out of that window. Now on to organizing our tracks. You can see at the very top here, I've already renamed the top two tracks as Snare 1 and Snare 2. I'm pretty sure these may be some kind of samples because they're almost too clean. Okay, you don't have a lot of bleed in between each hit. So let me just play a little bit and you can hear it. There's nothing, there's nothing. Then we got a snare. Okay, so that's definitely a sample. Okay, and this is named AD Big Kit Gretsch. So there's a lot of name in there that's taking up way too much space on the track header. So we're definitely going to be renaming a lot of these along as we go. But what we're going to do at this point is start the discovery process and just start renaming our tracks and organizing them in order of where we want them to show up. So if we get to an area and we're not quite sure what it's called or what it sounds like, the best way to do this is use our range tool, which you can get by choosing the Smart tool or just by pressing R on your keyboard. And that gives you this cursor, and we can use this to make a range. Let's go ahead and highlight this section here. This is called a rock snare. So we'll call it rock snare 1 and rock snare 2. Okay. Now I already have some snares up here. So what we can do is go ahead and select both of these tracks and then hit Command up arrow to move our tracks into place. And this one was kind of like a snare roll and a snare roll 2. And we have our kicks. We have another little thing down here. Okay, so pretty much anywhere you can kind of see already that this track has snare rolls, and then more snare rolls down here. So, and they're really just different variations of the same part. So more than likely, we're just going to end up deleting some of these tracks because they're just going to be way overkill and just not needed. Okay, so now we're getting into whatever this is. Okay, so this is a like a big snare, big SN. Probably the same thing for this one. I'll call it big SN2. And since these are snares, we're going to bring this up to where the other snares are, right above where these snare rolls are. So we have all these snare tracks right here. It makes for a very fat snare sound, but we still have to find a way to organize all these. Let me show you how to make a group real fast, and then you will know how to do that later. There's two different ways we can make groups in Mixbus. We can select the tracks by clicking the first one and then going down to the last one that you want to choose and then holding down Shift, selecting that one. And now we're going to right click in this little black area and say create new group from selection. It's going to bring up our track bus group dialog box. And we're going to call this snare. And we're also going to give it a color that is blue and hit new. Now for the snare rolls, let me show you the second way to group tracks. In the same black area where we right clicked, now we can left click with our mouse at the top of the header where we want to start our group and just start dragging down. Okay. Now we release and the track bus group comes up. We're going to call this snare roll. And let's go ahead and give it the same color as before. Okay. So now we have our main snare tracks and these snare roll tracks. Now, so far we have 4 kick drums. Okay, let's highlight this section and press A. But let's go ahead and right click, create new group from selection. We'll call this kick and give it the same color. Pretty much all my drums are blue. You can organize your tracks a different color if you want to, but that just lets me know for every single session that I open up, if I see blue, I know it's drums. If I see some kind of pink color, there's going to be a bass. Green are guitars. Yellow is for vocals, and purple is for background vocals. Keyboards, strings, synths, stuff like that can be orange. And that's really the main basic palette of colors that I use all the time. Now this says B3 on the track name, but let's just go ahead and use our range tool and highlight this section and press A to listen to what we have. And it does. It sounds like a B3. So let's do the second method here, and let's scroll down in the black area. We're going to call this B3. Like I said, my keys strings are usually orange, so we're going to make it an orange color. And now so far we have a very vibrant looking session with drums that are blue and B3 that is orange. The next little section here, let's highlight this and see what we have. Okay, obviously it sounds like a bass. So we're going to make this our bass tracks. And I've recently decided I wanted my bass to be pink, somewhat pink. Because when you click on a track, it naturally turns red. And if my bass is already red, then it could be confusing. So I just made a totally different color. Let's highlight this section here and see what we got. Hey lady, tell me, don't you know? Okay, so that is a vocal. And this is labeled Echoplex. So we're going to say EP vocal. And let's go ahead and drag this all the way down. Okay. Because usually vocals, background vocals, stuff like that is going to be at the end anyways. So one little trick, if you're zoomed out like this, is if you use your range tool to highlight something and you press Z, that's going to make it nice and big. Okay? But maybe you don't want to go full on that size. So we can press Shift Z to go back to our previous view. And now let's go ahead and press F. And that'll make it nice and big for us. Let's go ahead and listen to this. So this is a good example of maybe we should be deleting some of these, okay? Because we have a guitar 57, which is an SM57 right on the cab. And we also have a duplicate, and we have a guitar DI. Now, some people like reamping or just changing the sound after the fact. So we're actually going to keep the DI, but let's listen to these two tracks and let's figure out which one we're going to keep, okay? And really they sound about the same. So I'm not going to worry too much about this. And I'm just going to go ahead and right click and remove. And we're going to get rid of that track, okay? So we are going to group these together. We're going to say guitar 57. Let's go ahead and make it green. And now we have our guitar track here. And these tracks are in alphabetical order, so that's why they're kind of all over the place. Sometimes you can receive tracks that have been exported with the track number before the track name. And what that does is help you to keep everything in the same order as your previous session. But whoever made these tracks did not do that. So we have to kind of deal with it as it is. So let's listen to these vocals. Hey, baby. So there's a lot of vocals going on, and these are all processed with the H3000 by Eventide. So we're going to go ahead and group these together and say H3000 vocal. And all main vocals are going to be yellow. All right, let's go to the next track, and we got two with the same looking part. So let's highlight these and press A. So these are the Hammond high duplicate, which is the same as the B3 part up here. So what we can do is keep those highlighted. We're going to scroll up until we get to our other B3 part. And now I'm just going to pull down this group. So now you see that the tracks are now added to the group and they change their color as well, which is really cool. Okay, let's move these toms up here, which I forgot to do earlier. And we'll give those a color here in a little bit once we figure out if there's anything else that needs to be added. All right, so the next group of tracks are simply a mix recall. So a fun thing we can do here is we have V for visible and A for active. Let's go ahead and uncheck the active side So that way they are technically not in the mix at all, okay? They can't be heard. And we can also click on these, right click, or we can say hide. Okay, so now they are hidden, which also means they're inactive and they're not visible. I guess we could have also checked the boxes over here for visible, but it's the same kind of thing. So we basically made them inactive and we made them invisible in the session. Okay, so Shift L to get back out of that. And this one is called hi-hat, which I'm assuming is a hi-hat track, and it is. Okay, so we got hi-hat, kick, overheads, some kind of rack tom. So let's bring these up to the very top of the session. Then we can always move things around when we need to. Usually my overheads are going to be a little bit after the snares. Okay, like so. And we have our kick drum on top. And let's bring the hi-hat down, same kind of area, just before the overheads. And we have a rack tom. Which is going to go after the overheads. Okay. Now, since we have some other kicks here, we can highlight that and move those up. Okay, so these are going to be the sample kicks, though, and this is our natural kick sound. Let's keep going through this session, and we have a whole slew of sax verb tracks. So let's see what these sound like. Okay, we have one little blip over here, so we're going to go ahead and include all these tracks. And we're going to make it a group, and we're going to call it sax, and we're going to make it orange. Okay, now this is a fairly large session, so don't get overwhelmed if this is too much information to look at. But you can see that I'm repetitively doing the same thing over and over and over. I'm using my range tool to make a range selection. I'm pressing A to listen to what I have. Okay, then I'm just going in and simply grouping those tracks together. I can always rename them something a little bit shorter later on, but for now I'm just trying to get through all these different tracks that we have. Okay, the next section is labeled snare bottom, snare top, snare D28, and another snare D28. So let's go ahead and highlight these and press A. All right, so these are going to be our natural drums. And since these are already highlighted, I'm just going to right click in the black area, create group from selection. I'm going to say Nat SN for natural snare. We'll make these blue and hit new. Okay, now I'm going to hit command and go ahead and scroll all the way up. Okay, just before that kick. So let's go back down here. You can see that's the same performance, right? It's the same performance, same kind of waveforms, one just slightly different. So let's go ahead and highlight this and listen to it. Okay, upright 47, upright ribbon. So technically this was a piano recorded with a U47 by Neumann and also a ribbon mic. So we use the second method to create our group. We're going to call this upright piano. We'll make it orange, because pianos are orange. This next one is a vocal comp, so let's listen to that. Hey, lady. Okay, that's a lot more natural sound than the H3000 tracks that we heard earlier. So we have a few echo plates. Basically, these are all effects. And we are magically at the end of our session here. So what we're going to do, this is a dub track. Let's see what that does. Reason to this rhyme. So when it says it's a dub track, it literally is one main vocal and then a dub or an overdub of the same part. Okay. Now let's go ahead and make a group of these other tracks, and these are going to be vocal effects. We'll make them yellow. And lastly, let's go ahead and make a main vocal group. We're going to call this lead vox. And we'll also make these yellow. All right, so we have a kick drum here that's not colored. This is going to be our natural kick. And just for fun, we'll make it a group and say nat kick, and we'll make it blue. All right, so here is our whole session. We have the drums in blue. We still have some of the hats, overhead, stuff like that going on. We have 2 rack toms. Let's go ahead and group our overheads. We'll make those blue. We'll make the toms in its own group. And we'll just right click on the hi-hat and change the color to blue. And we'll keep that separate from a group, okay? Because essentially, once we get everything routed to the buses, we'll be able to move all the different levels up and down with our bus faders and not necessarily just grabbing a track and moving them that way. Okay. Now this still has us making a decision on, do we need to keep all these tracks for our snares? Okay, or kicks or anything else like that. Now to some people this may still seem a little overwhelming because we do have so many different kicks and snares and so forth. But this is just the initial stages of organizing your session to where you can clearly see what you have. And let's go ahead and move these vocals down to where the other vocals are. We'll make them just below. Put these at the very bottom here. So we have our effects, our H3000 vocals, and we have our main vocal. Okay. Now, if you want to go in and alter these colors just slightly, we can go in and edit our group, click on the color. And now we can bring this down to maybe more of a gold color. So it gives that a little different look. And we can go ahead and make our H3000 vocals purple. So they act kind of like background vocals. And that just gives them a little bit more of a distinction. We can go in and do the same for our piano. Let's make it really bright, like that. Okay, we only had 2 guitars. We had a few basses, a few B3 tracks, and a whole lot of drums. All right, the next thing that we want to do is go back and maybe rename some of these tracks, especially if you're using a DAW controller. I have the QCon Pro G2, and this has a nice LCD screen that tells you the names of the tracks. But if the tracks are too long, they're really not going to show up that well. So what we're going to do is just click on the track header and hit F, and it's going to make them a little bit bigger. Okay, and these are snare bottom, snare top. So that's fairly easy to just go ahead and say snare B, SNT, SND28, and SND28 too. Let's go ahead and listen to each one of these here. So let's ungroup them so we can just listen to each one individually. And we'll make our selection and press A. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so the D28 and the D28-2 are 2 different samples. So we may want to go ahead and mix those individually a little bit lower. So we can bring those down. Now turn the group back on and solo it, and then we can listen to all of them. You can always bypass the group momentarily by holding down Shift if you want to go in and move one of your faders without having to move all the other ones in the group. Let's go ahead and press Z, zoom out a little bit. Let's listen to the next set of snares. Hit the track header and press F. It'll stretch out those tracks a little bit more so you can see them. Okay, let me bypass one of these. Let's highlight our tracks. Okay, sounds good. Let's check out our metal kicks. Let's keep moving on here. We have our Hammond B3 tracks. All right, let's listen to the bass. So there's really 3 of the same bass tracks. I'm going to go ahead and say is overkill. Let's go ahead and listen to each one individually and just make sure that they don't have any different tonality. And if they don't, we're just going to delete 2 of them and keep 1. All right, that one's a little bit more growly. That one's darker. And that's more full. So let's actually keep 2 of these. We'll keep the brighter one and the more low one. So we just got 2 of those to deal with. And rename them. So bass high and bass low. Okay. Do the same thing for our guitars. We're going to say guitar 57 and guitar DI. Now, these saxes are a left and a right. So these are reverbs. So we're going to double click and say sax verb left, sax verb right, SV2 left, SV2 right, SV3 left, and SV3 right. Okay, so those are more organized now. Let's go ahead and highlight these, see what they sound like. Okay, let's bypass our group. Let's solo these individually. All right, so now this is interesting because we actually don't have any reverb on these at all. So I'm kind of wondering, do we need to keep all these? Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, no, we're not going to do that. Okay. So these 2 tracks are the same as this, and these 2 tracks are the same as that one. And then we have this track, which is what the stereo reverb of this is. And then let's listen to this one individually. Okay, so there you go. We did all that grouping and organizing just to get rid of these tracks right here. Because what we're going to end up doing is sending these to a bus, and then we can just apply our own reverb to that, since we didn't actually get affected saxophone tracks. We've already organized the piano, but we'll just call this sax 1, sax 2, and sax 3. We'll call this piano 1 and piano 2. Vocal comp. This is going to be vocal dub, V, echo, plate 1. All right, now, just so we don't get sucked in like we did on the saxophones, let's go ahead and listen to these echo plate tracks and see what we actually have. Okay. Tell me, don't you know? Your man's been driving since you went home. Okay, so these are actual affected tracks, and they are left and right. So essentially, we're going to say vocal echo plate one right. This is called Vocal Magic, so we'll say VM left, VM right, and there's that. And now we have all these H3000 vocal tracks.
Hey baby, tell me what's the use in crying over him.
So we're going to do it this way, just to make the naming process really fast. So H31, H32, H33, H34, H35, and H36. Okay. So now they're going to show up on our DAW controller a lot easier. And let's go back through and check and see if anything that we missed here. So let's say we got B31, B32, B33, B34, B35. Okay, there's that one. We have our overhead left, overhead right. Rack tom, I usually name T1. And then we got T2 for our two different toms. We have HH for our hi-hat. And these last few tracks here, let's rename these. These are still all in the snare roll kind of thing. So SNR3, SNR4, SNR5, SNR6. And let's do the same thing for our kicks. All right, let's rename this one Metal Kick 3, Metal Kick 4. And there's that. So it took a while, but we have all of our tracks color-coded and renamed so that way when we actually start doing the mixing process, we'll be a lot farther down the road and a lot less confused as well. If you like this video, this is just one in a series of videos that's going to be here on the Harrison Consoles channel on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe down below and click the bell so you'll be notified the next time we release a video just like this one. Once again, I'm Nathan from Harrison Consoles, and we'll see you in the next video.